Preview.
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Buzzer. I am your host, Landon Potvin, and again, we are joined by Seattle native Mike Shannahan. How are you doing today, Mike?
I am doing well, man. How are you? It's good to be here.
Yeah, no, this is awesome stuff. I'm excited. We are doing the Central Division this time. 12 players again, I think. We did 10 last time. But I'm going to just kick it off with the Chicago native himself, Windy City Assassin, Derrick Rose. He's the reason why I really started paying attention to basketball. The guy was just he was such an assassin. Fortunately, his career cut short with the 2 torn ACLs, but now he's in his bag again with Detroit. He's a 3-time All-Star, and he is a valuable trade piece right now. Like I said, just unfortunate with his ACLs. Poked in the eye a couple of times, and 5 teams later, he's averaging 18 points a game and 6 assists with the Pistons. So, Mike, you have Derrick Rose on your list, I'm pretty sure, so you can go off about him later. You're number 12.
I do, no, and I will, and I love Derrick Rose. So but you'll hear what I have to say about him later because, and I won't spend too much time on this because I'll get to it in a second. But Derrick Rose basically could be anywhere on anybody's list, and for the most part, I would just sit back and agree with them because he's just one of those guys who got cut short due to injury, and it's like, what could have been? So anyways, I'll start with my number 12, Ben Wallace of the Pistons. Look, I hear what you're going to say. I do. But Ben Wallace acquired from the Magic in 2000, and during his first 6 seasons in Detroit, he really became the premier defender in the NBA. He won 4 Defensive Player of the Year awards during that stretch, 02, 03, 05, 06. He made 5 All-NBA defensive teams and played in 4 All-Star games. He led the league in rebounds twice, 01 and 03, blocks once, 02, and defensive win shares 4 times, 4 freaking times, 02 to 05. I think most importantly, his interior defense was so crucial to that 2004 championship run. I won't go into the total details of the run, but you know how much of a force he was at that point. And then he spent time in Chicago and Cleveland, and that's fine. I just wanted to mention that because they're in the Central Division here. But he returned to Detroit in 2009 for his final 3 seasons of his career, which I know he was nothing like he was before, but come on, it's cool to come back. And there are a few players on this list who actually have done this, where they come back to their team, settle, and retire there. But if I can sum him up in just a sentence, I guess Ben Wallace kind of epitomized what it meant to be a Piston, playing defense with strength, hustle, and toughness. And even with very, very little offensive talent, he ranks as one of the best the franchise has ever seen.
All I'm going to say on this topic right here, Mike, he's basically a modern-day Dennis Rodman with a little bit of a better jump shot. And by far, his better days were with the Pistons, so I totally agree. 12 is such a reasonable spot, but for most of these lists, 10, 11, 12, all up for grabs. Anybody can make these lists. Talk to my buddies. Chris had Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love on this list. So you can go, like I said, you can just go anywhere with your 10, 11, 12. So let's go to my number 11. I got Reggie Miller. Might be a little bit high for your sake or anybody else's sake, but, I mean, the guy was a killer, but only for 5 years. Outside those 5 years, the guy was, I don't know, not so great. 5-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA. The only known thing for Reggie Miller is the shove on Michael Jordan and then hit the big shot in Game 6 to eventually lose in Game 7. I mean, they put up a great fight, of course, but they forced the 98 Bulls to 7 games, and then they didn't make it out of there.
And there's one more thing to Reggie Miller, but I'll get to that in a second.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, no. So my 11 is Chauncey Billups, who I know is a little further down on your list. And I'll get to Reggie Miller in a second, not to spoil my number 10, but Chauncey Billups, 5-time All-Star, won an NBA championship, obviously, in 2004, was the Finals MVP, 2-time All-Defense, 3-time All-NBA. He was the number 3 overall draft pick when he was drafted. Don't ask me the year because I forget off the top of my head. But in his first 6 seasons, he played for 6 different teams and then finally landed in Detroit, where he played 7 consecutive seasons and then spent the last year, like I just previously teased, came back and spent his last year in Detroit at the age of 37 and then retired. But you think of Chauncey Billups and you think of the highlight of his career being the 2004 NBA Finals victory over the Lakers, a performance that earned him the MVP honors, where he averaged 21 points, 5 assists per game, and really held Kobe Bryant, or at least limited Kobe Bryant's productivity on the floor. But number 11, Chauncey Billups.
I'm just going to bounce right off of that, Mike, because Billups is my number 10. He was a hooper in Detroit. In his career, 17 points a game, 7 assists, 3 rebounds, 2 all defensive. I like that, especially when he had to guard Kobe in the finals. Nobody knew Detroit was going to win against the Lakers. They were the complete underdogs there. But he was really dedicated to the game. He played 47 minutes in Game 3 of the finals. And in that same game, he held Kobe Bryant to 11 points, while dropping 27. So, I mean, the guy was a straight hooper and just a dog on defense. But what was weird to me, researching about Chauncey, was he played for 8 teams total in the NBA. That's for a guy that was above average like that. You just don't see that very much. I think it's funny that you got Reggie Miller now as your number 10. So
I know we flip-flop there. And so that's the weirdest thing about Chauncey Billups is I think for us being younger, even though I'm a little bit older than you, still I think we have the same view of Chauncey Billups. It's weird that he played for 6 different teams in his first 6 years after going 3 overall. I don't think that really happens. Not that I have much to back myself up on other than general feel, but still, again, my number 10, Reggie Miller, career 39% from 3, second all-time three-pointers made behind Ray Allen, plenty on his heels. You've got Steph Curry, Kyle Korver, James Harden, all creeping up on him, and I'm sure they'll surpass him, or at least a few of them will, and more to come. But he's a 5-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA. You know, Reggie Miller is one of those guys who kind of aged during his time, but he's also one of the few players who spent his entire career on one team, 18 seasons. So look, 18 seasons playing for one team, 18 years doing anything the same way for the same organization, employer, whatever the heck you want to call it. Yeah. There's something to be said about that. And then what I wanted to say is when I think of Reggie Miller, I think of his memorable the 25 fourth quarter points and the 8 points in 9 seconds. That's what I always think of is those 8 points in 9 seconds. But to wrap him up, I mean, look, the Pacers, before Reggie Miller, NBA fans really had no idea who they were prior to his arrival. It really was Miller who put the Pacers on the NBA map.
I say this about every team that played in the 90s. So unfortunate that he had to play in the 90s because, you know, he had to go against Michael Jordan, Black Jesus. So, I mean, it's just so tough to try to consider or put these guys in a list because, you know, you base these off MVPs or championships, but you had Michael Jordan taking everything during the 90s. So, Reggie Miller, I give him the most credit I can, put him at 11. So I'm going to start with my number 9 now. Sidney Moncrief. I don't even know if you know who that is. They call him the Squid. But 15 points a game, just under 5 assists, or 5 rebounds, just under 4 assists. 5-time All-Defense, 2-time Defensive Player of the Year, which were back-to-back. 5-time All-NBA, and 5-time All-Star. The Squid is kind of like Reggie Miller, whereas he didn't really hit his peak, his apex, until a certain year, and he wasn't there for long. But Jordan said in The Last Dance, and when Jordan says anything, it means something. When you play against Moncrief, you're in for an all-around basketball. Or you're excuse me, you're in for a night of all-around basketball. A spectator of the night. He'll hound you everywhere you go, both ends of the court. You just expect it. The guy was just a dog on defense, and it's strange to see small forwards win Defensive Player of the Year, but Kawhi's doing it now. Giannis has the chance to do it, but Moncrief was the guy back then, and the guy just locked you up.
No question. I know. I tried to do my due diligence of Sidney Moncrief, and this is a tough division even to rank, period, because there are a lot of people left off this list. Especially when you consider the 80s and the 90s. So it was really tough, but I kept them off. And say what you'll say, everybody. That's totally fine. So that was your number 9, correct?
Yeah, that was my number 9.
Okay, so my number 9, I'm going to bring it back to, I think, where you started, which is with Derrick Rose. And like I said, I think there's an argument to be made that Derrick Rose could either be higher on this list in terms of further up the list, or he could be left off the list completely. And honestly, for the most part, I really would understand the argument because he's kind of the epitome of what could have been. In his first few years in Chicago, Rose's impact on the Bulls in the city was matched only pretty much by Michael Jordan's. He accomplished more in a short time in the league than most ever did in their entire careers. He was the youngest MVP in league history, winning the award at age 22, and he was also the Rookie of the Year in 2009. Both of those feats they speak to career trajectory. So, boom, Rookie of the Year. He again progresses to 2 years later, becoming the MVP. A year later, the ACL injury, and then he sits out 2012 and 13. I think that's what it was, 12 and 13. Anyways, he's a career 18 points per game, 5 rebounds, and he was trending upward until the ACL injury in 2012, and he's kind of coming back to his average form here as of the last season. What I do want to say is before the injury in 2011, he finished 2011 with 25 points per game and was just an absolute highlight machine. It's hard to even say this and hold some factual value behind it. But look, every time I turned on SportsCenter in those days, he was on SportsCenter during the NBA season. He had such flow. He was one of the purest, smoothest point guards to ever play. And again, he just seems to me, he's one of those players, maybe the most of what could have been.
He has Zion's bounce, or Zion has his bounce. Derrick Rose vertical was so, not only was it quick, but it was super high. The guy was postering people like Steve Nash, LeBron James even. I mean, have you seen his dunk on Joel Anthony in the playoffs?
Yes.
Derrick Rose and his squad, he had a great team, by the way. Boozer, Dang. He had the young Jimmy Butler, Joakim Noah, who was a Defensive Player of the Year. At one point, just Derrick Rose. They gave the Heat a run for the money. I think it was 2010 when they first assembled in Miami. Derrick Rose, they almost beat him. And I think that's when that year or the year before when he was Rookie of the Year was when I started to become a fan of the NBA itself. So you could say Derrick Rose could be a hero for the NBA. I mean, that's a little bit of a stretch, but Derrick Rose
I hear what you're
is
saying.
pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So I'll go ahead and give you my number 8 here. There's a lot of Bulls on this this list, I have 4. Dennis Rodman, the Worm, he's coming in at number 8 for me. Just the guy was wild on and off the court. The reason he's called the Worm is because he can figure out ways, no matter who's trying to box him out, to get that rebound. The guy won 7 times, or he won the rebounding champ 7 times. That doesn't happen much at all. He averaged more than 14 rebounds a game in multiple seasons. He's a 2-time All-Star, which is kind of strange to me. The guy, we see him as such an important and pivotal role in the Bulls championships, but he only has 2 All-Stars. but thankfully he's a two-time All-NBA, two-time Defensive Player of the Year, eight-time All-Defense, which is really impressive since Michael Jordan was nine-time All-Defense, and he is a five-time NBA champ. But like I was saying, he is not much of a scorer, but is really important for that Bulls team, his rebounds and his defense. Rodman just knew that defense and rebounding was his thing.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, Landon, we've gotten away from here in 2020 is, and I mean, honestly, in the last decade, as far as the NBA is concerned, is look, the NBA is a scorers league now. It's less of a team game than it's ever been. Not that it still isn't, but when you look back at the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, that's what you saw was more of an overall team game. You saw a more prominent center position. You saw a more prominent power forward position. Not to say that some don't transcend the position, like someone we'll talk about later, I think, Giannis Antetokounmpo,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
others. But still, you know, it's important to remember as far as NBA history is concerned, people like Dennis Rodman because of the overall impact they had on the game. And I'll get to Rodman in a second, but my number 8 is Oscar Robertson. Only a two-time All-Star, one-time NBA champion. Oscar Robertson is so interesting because he is one of the game's greats, right? As far as this division is concerned, he played with the Bucks from 71 to 74. He had a career 25 points per game, 7 rebounds, 9 assists per game, 48 field goal percentage. But with the Bucks, it was well diminished, and that's because it was the tail end of his career. He retired with the Bucks. 16 points per game, just under 5 rebounds per game, 7 assists per game. Look, I believe he was 6'5". He kind of laid the sorry, I'm not even going to say kind of. Oscar Robertson laid the foundation for future point guards like Magic Johnson in particular. His ability to score, rebound, and get teammates the basketball was pretty much unprecedented for someone of that size, which again laid the foundation for people like Magic Johnson and what we're used to seeing now in our present day NBA. He did help guide the Bucks to their first championship in 1971, even though he wasn't the key to the team, because I know a young Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was, but still, Oscar Robertson was a big part of that 71 championship before he retired in 1973 and 74. And again, I just want to say this. Little known fact that the Oscar Robertson versus the NBA antitrust lawsuit pretty much resulted in the free agency rules that still remain in effect today. They pushed the merger back between the ABA a few years and really helped empower the players. And when we talk about the NBA, we are always talking about player empowerment. And I think a lot of that is due to Oscar Robertson.
Yeah, you said something about, well, I know you said actually that he's a two-time All-Star. But think about it. He was with the team for 4 years. He was with the Bucks for 4 years. Half of them, he was an All-Star and a one-time champ. So I think that's why he's so high or so low on our list. However you want to say, I don't really understand that logic. But I feel like the guy was overlooked, right? He had 30 point. He averaged 30 points a game 6 times. Of course, those were the Kings or the Royals back then. But the guy was a hooper, right? And like you said, he laid the foundation for Magic Johnson and just the point guards who really know how to do it all, I guess. But he was in an era with Wilt, Russell, Kareem, and many other big men, and he was still grabbing 10-plus rebounds a game and finding ways to get the teammates the ball and score the rock. So, I mean, the guy's number 7 on my list, and the big O, Oscar Robertson.
The big O. I know, honestly, I had trouble with it because if he had spent more time with the team. I'm learning from you, Landon. That's all. I'm learning from you in terms of how to rank exactly for these divisions because without, you know what, I'm just going to call myself out. I don't know exactly the divisions of the Cincinnati Royals and whoever else he played for. But if he did spend all that time in the Central Division, we'd be probably having a different conversation, or an all-time conversation would be different.
Robertson with they're the Cincinnati Royals. It was actually the
Mhm.
Sacramento Kings. So that is the Pacific Division. So they're different divisions, but I just wanted
Right.
to put that in there that he was scoring 30 points a game. So
No.
Mike, you're number 7,
Yeah. No.
unless you
And
want
it's
to
a
keep.
great point. No, it's a great point. That's what I'm getting at is if he had spent his career in the division, he would be way
Mhm.
higher on the list. So
Yeah.
my number 7, basically, I think we flip flopped here. Dennis Rodman. Dennis Rodman is someone I hold near and dear to my heart. Dennis Rodman is like, I don't want to say he's my spirit animal because he's not. I'm not that type of person necessarily. I think he's who I wish I could be if I had the confidence and the courage to become. But Dennis Rodman is the basketball player I was because I wasn't as skilled or as talented on the offensive end. But what I what I did was I made up for it on defense and hustling for rebounds. So I
Right.
always had a little soft spot for Dennis Rodman. 2-time All-Star, 5-time NBA champ, 2 with the Detroit Pistons, and the final 3 with the Chicago Bulls, but a 5-time rebound champ and an 8-time All-Defensive Player of the Year. I think he was actually 10 times. Just he spent 2 years on the second all-time for the defensive player or all defense, sorry, for the NBA, and then a 2-time defensive player of the year. So look, before he brought his crazy rainbow or blonde hair or whatever it is to Chicago, he already was literally an established force in this division with Detroit. He really epitomized what Detroit was all about. He had 2 rings with the Pistons and 2 defensive player of the year awards already under his belt. He may have only played 3 years with Chicago, but even then, he falls really, really, really close to the top, of the list when it comes to best players of the Chicago Bulls. His impact was undeniable. And
Mm.
let's see. I mean, he spent those last 3 years. His interior defense really was just out of this world, and his rebounding and his he turned rebounding into an art, which is
Yes.
exactly what the Bulls needed for their second title or their second three-peat, rather.
Right. Just to go off of that rebounding thing, in The Last Dance, Rodman stated he would study film on how Larry Bird, Magic John, Isaiah Thomas, how they would shoot the ball and how it would bounce off the rim, so we know exactly where to be. I you could not have said it any better when you said rebounding is an art for Rodman, because that could not be any more true. The guy, the guy studied the way that people shot the ball and how the ball came. That is just amazing to see, and that sets the bar super high.
Yeah, it does. You said it there in the Last Dance. That's probably the funniest part of the Last Dance when he's talking about
Yeah.
how he would see people's balls coming off the rim. So
So I'll give you my number 6 here, Mike. You have him a little bit lower, I think, but I got Giannis Antetokounmpo, only 25 years old, and he has made himself a force in the league. He's won MVP and is a serious consideration for another one this year. But I think LeBron should win it every year, but I guess that might just be me. I don't think you're gonna like what I'm about to say, but I think Giannis uses his height to his and length to his advantage, like he should. Every player should use their advantages to their advantage. I don't think he's that great of a basketball player. Okay, I think he's great. I just don't think he's the one step above great or elite. I don't think he's top 5 skill wise, talent wise, because let's say he loses a couple inches on his arms wingspan. Let's say he loses a couple inches in height. How good? Like the guy can't shoot, and all he can do is drive. Right? I mean, he's developing a 3-point shot, but like I'm saying, is he's using his advantages to his advantage. But like again, I say this with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar too. What if Kareem was a little bit shorter, or couldn't use the skyhook? How good could Kareem, or how good is Kareem really? Because if you're watching some of his film, all he's doing is fadeaway jumpers or little, and he's so much taller than everybody that he's just throwing the ball into the hoops. I mean, maybe my point isn't that great, but I don't know. 4-time All-Star, 3-time All-NBA, 2-time All-Defense, and 1 MVP because of his length and height, not talent.
And I appreciate what you're saying. I really do, because I agree in essence into what you're saying. The problem with what you're saying is that you're creating more of a scientific argument around height versus athleticism, which really complicates things when it comes to the human being's capability. We've so like last week we talked about Dwight Howard versus Shaq and the difference in athleticism. Not, and I appreciate the Shaq's athleticism in his early age, right? Okay, it's like if you were to scale up a Kobe Bryant, if you were to scale up a Steph Curry and say they're 7 foot, but they still have their skills, that's just unheard of. It just doesn't happen, right? And so here you have oh my gosh, that's why LeBron James is who he is, because he has his size and he has his athleticism. And so, and same with players like Magic Johnson at their position, Oscar Robertson at their position. So I totally agree with what you're saying. My problem no, go ahead.
It's really just a big what if,
Yeah.
What if Giannis was 2 inches shorter? What if his wingspan was a little bit smaller? But unfortunately, or fortunately for him, he's not. And he can just play basketball, and who cares what I'm saying about his big what if.
Well, that's fair. And so we'll just keep it moving here. My number 6 is Isaiah Thomas. Not my Isaiah Thomas as a Seattleite and as a true Seattle basketball scene guy, because my Isaiah Thomas
Right.
has been robbed of so much. But this Isaiah Thomas, 12-time All-Star, 2-time NBA champion, a Finals MVP. You know, he's the number 2 overall pick out of Indiana in the 81 draft. And look, dude, he's like Reggie Miller. He played each of his 13 seasons with the Pistons, over 979 career games. He averaged almost 20 points, almost 10 assists, and almost 2 steals per game. Isaiah is the true point guard. You know, he looked to pass first. He got the most out of his teammates, and he was just truly an incredible competitor. If you haven't seen the Bad Boys documentary, go see it. But for most of us who have, he's just one of those guys who was just a tough player. And look, at the end of the day, he led the Pistons to 9 playoff appearances during his tenure, including their first 2 NBA championships in 89 and 90. And he was the Finals MVP in 1990. 12 All-Star teams. He's a Hall of Famer. He's one of the top players in NBA history, no matter your Michael Jordan bias or not.
All right, Mike. I got a lot to say on Isaiah Thomas, so I'm going to save him for my thing. But remind me to bring up the team thing. I have it on my thing here, but just remind me to mention the thing about being a team player, because Mike, the book of basketball is such a great book, and Bill Simmons is teaching me so much. All right, let's go on to my number 5 so I can ramble on Isaiah Thomas next, because Scottie Pippen is my number 5. Pippen, at the time, a great Robin. He played arguably the best on-ball defense on the team with the Bulls, making that all-defensive team 10 times. Well, Jordan only made it 9. And Rodman made it the 3 times he was with the Bulls, I think. I think it's proved that Scottie's definitely more of a Robin than a Batman. When he went and played with Portland, you could argue his age, but Pippen wanted to leave a couple years earlier. I think it was 97 when he wanted to be traded. But yeah, he's just not a Batman, and he can really ball out, but he can't lead. Like when Michael Jordan took the years off to play baseball, he didn't even lead then. So I mean, it just speaks for itself. The money situation, I just think that was so stupid. Excuse my language, but that was just so stupid.
Stupid is fine, Landon.
A little bit selfish in my opinion. Like hindsight 2020, if the guy just waited one more year, would have most definitely gotten paid. I think that's the right situation. I forget when the money situation was, but like just wait a year because I mean, and Jordan didn't even get paid much either. So a guy like Jordan, who's arguably the greatest player of all time, was not even the highest paid player in the league. So, and Pippen, you're a Robin, dude. Chill. But seven-time All-Star, he was a Steel champ in '94, and he's a seven-time All-NBA player. So props to him. He's a great player. He's the best Robin of all time. Maybe Dwayne Wade could be an argument there, but I think you have him here too. Mike, go ahead on him.
Yeah, no, I've got it. I feel you, man. He's number 5 for me too. Like you said, 7-time All-Star. What I want to highlight is 10-time All-Defensive Player of the Year. Obviously, that includes both first and second team. However, I've got a few holes in your argument that I really want to look at because clearly Scottie Pippen's career was overshadowed by Michael Jordan. We get that. At the same time, there is no denying how elite he was as a player. Not only one of the best perimeter defenders of all time, but simply one of the most versatile players of all time. And so here's one thing I want to highlight. Pippen is a member of one of the NBA's most exclusive clubs, which is during the 94-95 season, he led the Bulls in scoring. He led the Bulls in assists. He led the Bulls in rebounds, blocks, and steals. And that made him at the time the second player in NBA history to accomplish that feat. Do not ask me who's done it since. But my point is, MJ was not on the team. MJ was playing baseball, not basketball. MJ was playing baseball. And so you say he can't lead, and I'm not saying personality-wise that he can lead. However, that year in particular showed just exactly what he could do if he was a number one.
Yeah, Mike, I totally agree with you. I'm not trying to diminish Scottie Pippen at all. The guy was great. I really don't see him as being a leader. Um, I guess not a leader as scoring wise, more of a leader team wise. And I think it shows too, because I don't even think they made it over 500 that year without Jordan. So moving on from Scottie Pippen, Isaiah Thomas, Zeke, 12-time All-Star, 2-time NBA champ, should be 3. I'll get into that later. 5-time All-NBA, assist champ in '89-90, and the Finals MVP. Okay, you ready, Mike? Isaiah Thomas, you could say, was the villain of the NBA. When they won their 2 championships, Michael Jordan not letting him onto the dream team, and how they treated other teams physically, right? I'm going to ask you a question, Mike. Do you know why they didn't add Isaiah to the dream team?
You know, there is a lot of speculation around that. There's a lot of rumor around that in terms of Michael Jordan's influence and other things.
Right. I don't know. Maybe this is definitely just my opinion. I think for at least 3 years, he was just like the villain of the NBA because Isaiah Thomas was the best player on that Pistons team. And you could say it's the coach telling him to do it, but I think it like all the fault, is that the right word? All the fault comes back to the best player. You know, if the Bulls didn't win, it's Jordan's fault. When LeBron doesn't win, it's his fault. So when the Pistons are beating up teams, punching Michael Jordan when he comes down the lane, you know, all those things, it's Isaiah's fault. So that's my case for him being the villain of the league. But as I mentioned, he knows the secret of basketball, and Bill Simmons is teaching me that secret. But it's as simple as this, Mike. Basketball, the secret of basketball is not about basketball. Me and Mike go to the same school, and I mentioned this quote in my presentation the other day. It just makes so much sense. You could have the greatest players, the 5 greatest players on your team of all time, and you can still lose. You know why? Because it comes down to teamwork, leadership, and coaching. and I forget the coaches. Chuck Daly, was he the coach of the Pistons? And he just emphasized and really blew up the secret of basketball, and that's why they're so successful. They traded away their second best player, Adrian Dantley, and they took a lesser Joe Dumars, and they improved as a team. Like, the secret of basketball was bold right there, you know. And Isaiah Thomas met with I think an interview with Dan Patrick. We just want to understand. Us people, we just now would understand what he's talking about. And it's true. But it's just, I don't know. Ever since I read that, it's just opened up so many tunnels for me. I'm going to say one story about Isaiah Thomas. And I think you're going to like this story. And then you can go on your number 4, and, I'll just shut my trap. Isaiah should have 3 rings, right? In '88, they played the Los Angeles Lakers in the finals after beating the Celtics, of course, and taking over the Eastern Conference. Game 6, the Pistons were winning the series 3-2. They could win the series. They end up losing the game by 1, but in the late third quarter, Isaiah Thomas sprains his ankle. He's out the rest of the third quarter. A couple minutes into the fourth quarter, he comes back. And he's hobbling around, and he sets the record that still stands today, 25 points in the fourth quarter of the finals, and they lose by 1. And then game 7, they lose by a couple points as well. So Isaiah Thomas was a sprained ankle away from winning 3 NBA finals. I didn't know that, first off. And I just think that's so incredible that that's a record. Only 25 points in a quarter. Wait, let me retreat. 25 points in a quarter is a lot, but I feel like, why Leonard having to carry the Raptors, I'm surprised he didn't. Stephen Curry, who's a shooter, only takes like 10 threes. Let me rephrase that again. Steph Curry, the monstrous scorer he is, I'm surprised he hasn't done it yet. Jordan, he never scored 25 points in a quarter in the finals, even playing against the Utah Jazz. I don't know. I just find that strange and amazing. So that's my rant on Isaiah Thomas. Zeke, second best point guard of all time, in my opinion. I did a lot of research on Zeke, and I'm so proud I got all of it out to you, Mike. So go ahead. You're number 4.
I'm going to let you breathe for a second and move on to my number 4, because I agree Isaiah Thomas is one of the game's greatest. My number 4 is someone who's hard to argue as a number 4, in my opinion. I don't know how comfortable I feel putting him at number 4. He was lower on your list, and rightfully so. I think that's totally fair. I'm looking here at career trajectory. And then I think of Derrick Rose, and I wonder, well, I don't even know if Giannis Antetokounmpo has played an entire season thus far as playing all 82 games, because he has struggled with injuries. But Giannis is a 4-time All-Star, 1-time MVP, which is pretty sick. 2-time All-Defensive Player of the Year, and he's the most improved in 2016, like you mentioned. Here's the deal, though, with Giannis. It took an adjustment for him to really feel out the NBA. His first 3 years were a struggle. I mean, this is just simply a tough one for me. He's in his 7th year, and while he has been one of the league's best in the last 4 years, his first 3 were just a big adjustment. And with that being said, as long as his career is not derailed by injuries and he can stay on this trajectory, Giannis is simply sick. And he uses his size and athleticism, like we were talking about, to his advantage, similar to the way LeBron does. I know you were kind of bagging on Giannis, and I totally get it. Like, that argument is valid in terms of just overall, gosh, I don't even know, scoring and athleticism, ability. But if you take those first 3 seasons away where he averaged simply just a lot less, take those away and you just go on the last 4. He's averaging 26 points per game, over 10 rebounds per game, and over 5 assists per game. He's simply a freak. It's no question. And if he stays on that path, he's going to be one of the game's best.
And thinking about it now, excuse me, Kevin Durant makes his living off of his mid-range. So what's any different than Giannis making a living off his driving? Or LeBron James is driving as well? Or Derrick Rose's super freakishly athletic dunking ability? Or Stephen Curry's shooting? People, or even a lesser player like Steve Kerr, who's more of a role player, that actually made his money off of just shooting the ball. Same thing for Ray Allen. So, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and crap on Giannis Antetokounmpo and saying he's, not so great. When the guy, I mean, you can't go wrong with Giannis. The guy's pretty great.
Yeah.
All right, Mike, I'm going to go on to my number 3 here, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I think we both have the top 3 are pretty similar. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with his Bucks, 6-time All-Star. He was an NBA champ and the Finals MVP of that championship. 2-time scoring champ, a block champ, and a 3-time MVP. And he was a 5-time All-NBA as well. I don't have much on him here. I mean, the numbers speak for itself. The guy was just a great. He leads the NBA in blocks and scoring, and he's 3rd in rebounding. And he's played the most seasons in the NBA. I think Vince Carter finally caught up to him. I think LeBron has a chance to catch up to him and most likely will, or be one short. But, Mike, you're number 3?
Yeah, same as you, man. Same as you. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, otherwise known beforehand as Lou Alcindor. And look, here's what I want to highlight, bouncing off you. He had a career 24, 11, and 3. Now with the Bucks, he had a career with the Bucks, he had 30, 15, and 4. Significantly, those 6 seasons were his best of his career in Milwaukee, aka the time he spent in this Central Division. So I think that's important to note. Look, he's one of the greatest centers of all time. It's really undisputable. He began his career in Milwaukee, and then he really dominated from the get-go before he went to the Los Angeles Lakers. But earlier we talked about Oscar Robertson and that 1971 championship. Probably the bigger portion, the bigger contributor to that was simply, at the time, Lou Alcindor at 7'2", lethal footwork, a soft touch inside, and his trademark sky hook. He kind of redefined the NBA at the center position, or redefined it. He probably defined it. And again, he led the franchise to its only championship in 71, which really solidified his status as, in my opinion, the greatest player in the Milwaukee Bucks organization.
You said he was dominating before he got to the Lakers, but the guy was dominating in high school, Mike. He was the number 1 recruited player in high school. He won championships there, and then he went to UCLA and won more championships there with the great coach John Wooden, and Jabbar, and it was just over from there. The guy just reaped the rewards, and he's one of the best, like you said, if not the best center in the NBA.
Yeah.
So moving on to my number 2, Mike, I got LeBron James. I'm really excited to see if you got LeBron at 2 or 1. But, it's King James, the kid from Akron. And I like this moment right here. The defining moment in his career was the block in Game 6 of the NBA Finals in 2016. I think if they don't, I'll be very upset. The block, his statue when he retires in Cleveland will be that block. And I want you to put this on screen when you edit this. The block. I want you to put the block on screen and watch it. He goes up to block Iguodala with his right hand, right? But look where his left hand is when he does block it with his right. He's baiting Iguodala. If Iguodala goes up with his right switches and reverse layups, he's still going to block it. He has the hand on both sides of the rim. So whichever way Iggy goes, he's most likely going to block it. And I think Michael Jordan is my one. So I think the only thing that separates LeBron James and Michael Jordan, honestly, I really do believe this, is the championships and the record in the finals. You know, LeBron has 3 rings, but I think he's lost 4 times, and Michael Jordan 6-0. You can't beat an undefeated record in the finals. And I'm really surprised he never won Defensive Player of the Year with the Heat. I know we're talking about the Central, but LeBron is a seriously good defensive player when he has to be. At times, he is very lazy. With the Lakers, you can see him just camping in the paint, or he gets caught watching. But Mike, you're number 2.
Landon, we're simply talking about number 1 and number 2 of all time. And I stand firm with my number 1 being Michael Jordan. I understand when people have the argument that LeBron James is number 1 as well. Not that I want to get into a huge argument about it. My point is simply intangible, or about the intangibles. Michael Jordan had such a will to win that LeBron James, simply due to, I think, the state of the NBA currently, the state of our society currently, it's all just different. The 1990s, the early 1980s, or the late 1980s were simply a different time. There is no way a superstar like LeBron James could take 2 years off, go play a different sport, whether that be football, like LeBron's talked about, or baseball, like Michael Jordan did. There's just simply no way someone could do that nowadays. Michael Jordan did because the intangible, hard to really describe and quantify level of competitive nature that Michael Jordan just existed in. And while LeBron James is an incredible competitor and he is very about his legacy and all sorts of things, it's really hard to go against these 6 championships, the 2 separate three-peats for on one single team. We've watched LeBron James bounce around. I'm not saying Cleveland and Chicago are exactly the same in terms of recruitability for players, but if people want to win championships, they knew LeBron was a pretty easy way to go about it, and they tried, and a few times they failed. And so, look, for me, number 1 is Michael Jordan. Number 2 is LeBron James. And I don't think, unless LeBron James can catch these 6 championships, that will ever change in my eyes.
Yeah, 6 championships is tremendously difficult to achieve. I'm going to touch on one thing before we wrap this up. You mentioned the will to win, the drive to win, and that is Michael Jordan has that times 100. The guy broke his foot in his second year, and he was telling his coach, look, dude, put me in. If you get fired, you get fired, but you better play me. In the last dance, and I'm sure if there was a last dance for LeBron James, our opinions might change, but watching the last dance for Michael Jordan, it just put him on a totally different level than anybody ever to play the game of basketball. That guy worked tremendously hard. The thing for Michael was the guy went and played baseball because the NBA was just not a challenge for him anymore. You know, his goals were to win championships. He won 3 in a row. He was like, I won 3 championships. I'm going to go play baseball, see if I can't win there. And he did great. He was a great ball player there, but he just, basketball was his thing. So he had to come back. and he did. He came back, won 3 more, and said, yep, I'm gone. And then he came back again, but prevailed there. But the guy just really wanted and did anything to win. And I think that and the championships are the only difference between LeBron. I mean, of course, LeBron wants to win. They just do it different ways. LeBron has to recruit players and go somewhere else to win championships.
Totally. And LeBron is athletically, physically a different beast than than Michael Jordan ever
Mhm.
was. And so he's even got that advantage to him. And it's a different NBA. I totally agree. However, it's tough to argue that MJ ain't the GOAT, baby. So I'll leave it to you.
Mike, I guess this really just sums it up. I love doing this with you. The shows are great. So thanks for joining us today. As for Landon Potvin, this has been Beyond the Buzzer.